All right. Welcome back, everyone, for an extra special anniversary Wellbeing Wednesday episode. So I'm super excited today. As most of you know, we have been celebrating our third year completion anniversary for Wellbeing Wednesday this whole week, along with National Mental Health Month, with some posts all throughout the week, just different mental health tips, resources, different things like that. Classie's provided some resources as well. So please make sure to check out all those things and pick up some little tidbits for yourself throughout our week of wellness anniversary celebration. So another special thing that we are doing today, we're doing a couple, but we are actually going to be on for a full hour because we love Classie so much and we always just have so much to talk about. So we are actually carving out a full hour today. Don't worry if you have to step away, you can always watch the replay, but we're going to have a full hour to discuss some really wonderful topics that I think are going to be extremely relevant to those of us in early care and education, or those who are just caregivers in general, or just people in general. I think it's going to be a lot of fun for that. And the second super special thing is we are doing a giveaway today. So the way to enter the giveaway is to put your name or say hi in the comments, and we will have one of our folks at Curricula Concepts jotting down those names, and then we're going to do a drawing at 1:25 today. So you can put your name in the comments anytime between now and 1:20, and then we'll be doing the drawing at 1:25. So, and we'll kind of pop in with some reminders to do that because we don't want you to miss out on this super special giveaway that we will tell you more about later, and we will contact the winner and give you all the fun details. So without much further ado, so that, like we said, this is our anniversary special. Classie was our very first speaker for Wellbeing Wednesday. She's been back with us every year. So with today, we are officially closing our third full year of Wellbeing Wednesday and launching our fourth. I can't believe that's even happening. And so it felt only right to have Classie with us yet again. And we're going to be chatting a little bit about, reducing burnout and how to overcome overwhelm to achieve work-life balance. And as usual, if y'all have questions, if you want to ask Classie something, if you want us to discuss something, please feel free to check that out in the comments and write those out. And I will be checking those periodically as well. So without further ado now, Classie, we're so excited to have you here.
Yay, I'm so excited to be here. I always love coming on Wellbeing Wednesday to support the help for everyone, but especially early childhood educators who, we know the kids are our future, but it doesn't make it easy.
Right? Just because we know the work is important doesn't mean that we get to kind of put ourselves on the back burner and take a back seat. And I know earlier this week we shared a really beautiful short video that you have on your YouTube channel that was all about really prioritizing yourself, those little pockets of time where this is me time. And so I'm really excited to kind of dive into that even more. And I know you were excited to kind of about this topic of reducing burnout and how to overcome overwhelm, along with this work-life balance. So with that, I'm sure you have tons to share with us, and I'm sure we'll have tons to talk about as we go, but I kind of want to kick it to you to start us off in kind of whichever direction you feel is best today.
Yeah, thank you for that, Susanna. So, it's always, when we talk about burnout and we talk about work-life balance, one shift that I like for people to make, just in our language, and we do this all the time, don't we? Just in our language, that word balance. A lot of times we feel like everything, when you're holding something that it has to be that's equilibrium, it has to be equal. Or like I need to have equal parts over here, equal parts over here. I like to change that word to harmony. When we think about harmony, it gives a more holistic approach to the idea of what it means, because sometimes harmony might look like 20% here, 10% here, 30% here, and then it shifts, but everything's able to work in a harmonious way where it's not causing major disruptions and all of the different turmoil and stressors that come up that increase the chances of somebody experiencing burnout. When we think of trying to balance something, you're like trying to you think of different spinning plates and you're trying to balance them on your hands, on your feet, and keep that same equal type of energy that's going to be dispersed throughout all of them. And sometimes that's just not true. Sometimes that is just not going to be the case. And so I'd like for us to demystify this idea of balance, of work-life balance, and shift into the perspective of work-life harmony. And that's going to change throughout the context of your current situation. You might face a death in the family. And so the harmony that you might need to focus 30% or 40% towards your grief and your healing, where then you might need to just do 20% on business or work, and you might have to take a break. You might only be able to give 10% in your relationship, your marriage, your friendships, or whatever the case might be. But the key to that is communication and self-awareness. Those are the key aspects of that. But that might look like that looks more like the harmony and identifying what do you need to prioritize a little bit more so right now in your life and in your work to help you experience more peace, more calm, and that stress reduction. That's how we get to there. Balance will have us actually thrown all the way off and thinking that everything needs to be equal. You need to have equal output, equal effort, equal energy in every single area. And that's just not true. So what do you think about that?
Oh, girl, that is huge. I have never actually heard it put that way. And as soon as you said it, it clicked. I was like, oh, yeah, I do try to make every single thing equal. It's like, okay, if I have three things going on, I need to put 33.333% in here and here and here. And that's not necessarily the case. The balance, like you said, and a lot of how we view wellness is this holistic piece. And so the beautiful part is taking balance and looking holistically and saying the same thing. Sometimes I might need to really push forward in my career and like that's where I'm focusing, right? And maybe some of the other areas like my other hobbies and whatnot, those kind of go down a little bit. It doesn't mean I'm out of balance. It could
Right.
mean I'm still in harmony and I'm still in my balance, but it
Exactly.
doesn't necessarily mean equal, like you said. And so I don't know about anybody watching, but for me, that was just a big light bulb coming on of like, oh my goodness,
Tell
that
us in
makes
the
a ton of
comments what y'all
sense.
think about that. What you think about that
Yes.
concept. Is that something that you've thought about or considered as you are navigating life and work and your well-being? Let us know. Are you shifting into that idea of harmony, or do you find yourself thinking everything in your life, across everything that you're doing, you have to put in that equal effort, that equal amount of energy? And if you don't, then, maybe that's where those feelings come in, those negative feelings, those negative thoughts. I'm not good enough. I'm a failure. I can't do this.
Mm-hmm.
And where your belief system starts to dwindle, and you start going into kind of those kind of self-loathing and the negative self-talk cycles, versus, oh, let me just have a little bit more harmony and identify. And that's where grace comes in and self-compassion, comes in. And none of us are perfect. We're not superhuman. We don't have superhuman strength. And life is always going to throw us curveballs. So this is how we are able to approach life in an adaptable way and an intentional way. Yeah, that's what I'm all about. My company being called Intentional Life and Business Design. So you're talking about how do you design your life with intention? Well, this is one way that you approach that intentionality, and we're also able to, over time, remove this sense of I need to be perfect. We remove this sense of, if I don't do it to this level, then I'm a failure. And it gives us that grace and that self-compassion to just like, you're a person, you're human, you're imperfect. And how do I give myself grace and love myself through the different changing times of my life?
So, kind of a question that's coming up for me on that is, a lot of times we have other people that we answer to, whether that's clients, whether that's our bosses, whether that's our coworkers, whether that's the families we're serving. A lot of times we answer to other people, and there are certain times in our job where we just have to get things done. Like we know, like it just has to be done. But also, we don't want to have that overwhelm, and we don't want to necessarily, like, we want to give ourselves grace. So I'm curious to get your thoughts on when those demands are placed on us, and it's kind of like it has to be done. How do we also incorporate this idea of grace and harmony and balance to kind of reduce that feeling of burnout and overwhelm? So I'd love to just kind of chat about that.
Yeah, so great question. And so diving in, I know earlier this week there was a post about schedule rules and boundaries. And so to me, this is that first step. Schedule rules and boundaries give us space for personal leadership. And a lot of what happens is we feel like time is happening to us or against us or around us. And we're just like, whoa, where in the world did the time go? I've got all these demands. I've got all these different things to do. So when we talk about schedule rules and boundaries, it taps into personal leadership where we have to identify who we are. We have to identify what impacts us negatively around managing our time, around operating optimally when crisis happens, when we have a lot of demand. A lot of us don't tend to self-reflect and say, okay, when these things happen, how do I normally react, and how does that negatively impact? What do I do? Do I veg out? What distractions are there that keep me from managing my time effectively? What distractions are there when crisis happens where I might go into maybe avoidance behaviors? Maybe I'm scrolling on social media, or I sit and I watch TV for 5 hours a week, and I just, let this TV show watch me. And these are in fact signs of burnout, and signs that we're not actually checking in with ourselves and rejuvenating energy. So the first thing is developing schedule rules and boundaries, which requires a deep self introspection to see, okay, when I have a lot on my plate, how do I tend to react that negatively impacts my ability to get work done? Am I scrolling on social media for hours? Do I pick up the phone if somebody calls me? So you know me, Susanna, my phone stays on D&D. My phone
Mhm.
stays on D&D. There are a select few people that are in my favorites or emergency contacts, so you can get through. And if you know how to get through D&D, you just call 3 times. That third time, it'll come through. So if it's an absolute emergency, people know, call Classie 3 times. She's usually on D&D as a way to protect my work time, my dedicated time towards certain tasks. And so that's what schedule rules and boundaries give us. So that's kind of that first step, identifying those things that negatively impact your time management, your schedule, your task completion, your to-do list, and saying, okay, the rule looks like put phone on D&D when you have certain strategic tasks that need to be complete. Then the boundary around that is, do not look at your phone and scroll through social media, or if only if it's an emergency contact or favorite that whose call comes through, do you answer? So you create the rule that says don't do X or do X. And then you create the boundary or the system, the habit, the behavior around that will support that rule. And so that will also help you. And this is also true when crisis happens. So I think it's always important to have rules and boundaries for many things. So again, back to knowing yourself. So you've got a lot of tasks that are already done. You're kind of navigating your tasks, but then boss comes in and it's like, here's 10 more things for you to do, while you also have a child over here that's doing something. And you're like, oh my gosh, I'm just ready to go cry in a corner, curl up in a ball. And I don't want to touch the rest of this day. So this is also where so this isn't schedule rules and boundaries. These are your personal care rules and boundaries. So when these things happen, check in with yourself. Okay, how am I feeling? Am I feeling overwhelmed? Self-awareness is extremely important, and self-regulation, being committed to self-regulation, is important. Because see, a lot of times what happens in crisis is when it feels like we're putting out all the fires, everything feels important, and then you're immediately and instantly overwhelmed. And for some people, you start to get hot, you get sweaty palms, your face starts to feel like inflamed, and and that's that stress cortisol response in the body. So your temperature's rising and you are getting flustered. You're not being able to think as clearly. And so then you just start doing. You're like, okay, I need to do this. I'm going to do this. You all know what I'm talking about. Y'all are like,
Yes.
been there, done that. That was me yesterday.
Right. Well, and what's interesting too, so you mentioned the cortisol response. And for anybody who's been in any of my trainings, sorry, y'all, you've heard this a million times, but it is the hill I will die on. Like our body, like the stress response is meant to keep us alive and protect us. But our body does not understand the difference between life, like something that causes us stress, like a life threatening tiger running after us, or a tight deadline. If we get triggered and feel attacked in some way, whether it's emotionally, physically, mentally, whether it's a baby crying, someone startles us, or literally somebody is coming after us and we need to run for our lives, the body does not know the difference. The body will respond the way the body is meant to respond equally. That is where it will do the same equally
Yep.
piece. And so when that happens, and this is something that I like to touch on too in a lot of my trainings, we hear fight or flight, right? So when even if it's a deadline, our body interprets that as my life is in danger. So all the things that Classie's talking about, those are all things that need to happen in the body if you are running from a tiger. If you're running from a tiger, your heart rate needs to go up, your pupils need to dilate, you need to tunnel vision and focus on getting away, and that is it. The rest of your body shuts down and you have all this extra energy. Well, in addition to fight or flight, and Classie, you kind of mentioned something about this, there's a really important third option. There's actually a fourth one, but I'm just going to touch on the third one right now, which is freeze. And what I have found is a lot of us educators have not heard of that before. So what happens, it's basically playing possum. I mean, we're in Arkansas. I can say playing possum, everyone knows what that means. But that is actually the same level of response as fight or flight. So there's fight, flight, freeze. And when we freeze, especially we as women, what I've heard a lot is, oh, I can't think. I don't understand. My brain doesn't work. And what happens is then we beat up on ourselves because we think that, oh, I'm just dumb, or I can't think, or I'm doing something wrong, or I'm not enough. Actually, that is your body playing possum. It is a response to your body interpreting that your life is being threatened. So when that brain fog, apparently it's kicking in for me. When that brain fog kicks in and your mind feels like it's just locked, it won't work. Instead of beating ourselves up, remind yourself, okay, this is my stress response. This is my version of fight or flight. I will tell y'all that is my number one. If I am triggered or stressed in any way, I go immediately to freeze. I can't think, I can't speak. It's like all of a sudden no things come out of my brain. And so I just want to validate if anybody has that and let you know that that is an indicator that your body thinks it's threatened. That is an indicator that you are in fight or flight. It's just showing up as freeze. And so that's just something really important to think about and be aware of. And just one other plug, I believe it was in Monday's post. Classie has this really great kind of self-awareness see again the freeze. This is what happens. So if anybody's wondering, what does freeze look like? It looks like this when I just can't come up with the word. And I'm like, what's happening? But it's like a self-awareness quiz or form. And so if you're like, how do I start building awareness around this? I highly recommend checking out Monday's posts and going through that for yourself, because it will build self-awareness. All right, I've taken up enough time, Classie. It just like that's my big, those two things are like my big thing that I feel like a lot of people don't understand, and they just beat themselves up because they think it's just them. So anyways, continue. You're talking about crisis and self-awareness and all those things.
No, that's great because I was getting there. So I mean,
Yes.
I was
Teamwork.
getting there because in identifying, you need to identify where you fall, how you normally react. Because the more you bring things into your conscious awareness, the more we can control them. As long as things are just operating subconsciously and you're just like, I don't know why I do this, right? We don't know why. We can't control what we don't know. Once we know once it's in our face. So identify when crisis happens, how do I usually respond? Is it fight? Is it flight? Is it freeze? And Now, here's the other one. People don't think about this, which is fawning. So that
I
is
was
that
wondering if you
fourth
were going to get there.
that fourth one. We're so used to hearing fight, flight. Some of us are used to hearing fight, flight, or freeze, but we forget about the fourth F, which is fawning. And that's kind of that lesser known one that really involves where we're trying to appease the source of the danger to avoid the conflict. Where you're talking to your boss and you're like, how can I help you? You become that people pleaser, which you oftentimes end up not actually getting the things done. You might go to the great lengths to try to do so many different things to get things done where you're dropping the ball. Things are definitely not in harmony. And so you actually end up and you're like, why does it feel like I made the situation worse than what it was in the beginning? When I was literally just,
Preach.
I was just trying
I was
so
trying to
hard
help.
I was just trying to help. But so identify where you fall when crisis happen. Do you fight? Do you take flight? Do you freeze? Do you fawn? These are all indicators of stress response. So identify that. That's the first thing. Then you create your checklist of self-regulation. So you're like, I know that I am in fight mode. When I'm in fight mode, I do this, I do this, I do this. So then you create the anecdotes for those. So list them out, whatever it is that you do. When you're in fight mode, you're just like, you just go full force. You don't even think about the what you got to do. You're just like, okay, this was just thrown on my desk. Mm-hmm. I need to just start doing this thing, and then I'll figure out how to get to the next. When in reality, yes, everything is important, but levels of importance are still nuanced. And so you can actually slow down and say, okay, I already had these 10 things to do. Boss just gave me these other 5 things to do. And did boss give me a due date? Or did they say immediate? Did they say EOD? Did they say, and if the boss didn't give me a due date, can I go and approach boss and ask boss, when would you like each of these to be given to me by? See, now I have more clarity and I can strategize my next steps outside of emotional stress and impulse.
And I will share as well. So exactly what you just talked about, I have started doing myself, because when I get things, again, part of my freeze is also everything is equally important. And so it has been so helpful for me. One, I'm not necessarily expecting everyone to respond and give me what I need. Like, that's expecting them to do for me. Some of my coworkers are great with it and they've done that, and I'm like, that's awesome, but that's not what I have done. Is I will go back and say, when I can get this done by the end of today, will that work for you? Because what happens is, if it's not, that'll trigger them to say, actually, I need this done in the next hour. Okay, great, because that helps me prioritize, and it shows willingness to work with and your coworker, your boss, and also showing respect for their time. Because a lot of times we think, oh, well, when we don't have a deadline, like, oh, I'll make it work. But actually, I will say it makes me feel so much better, because I can clearly prioritize. And I know, okay, I've been working on this long-term project. This has come up. It needs to be done before noon. Okay, I need to focus on that, get that done. Or if they say, oh, no, it doesn't need to be done until the end of this week, perfect. I can work that in. And it's super useful as well. And I love the checklist that you're talking about. So, I mean, if anybody, I've also been doing that too. When I'm in fight, like, I get defensive. That's my own self-esteem stuff. I will 100% own it. But like, I don't know about you, but when you're in fight, you have so much adrenaline, right? That cortisol, you're ready to face that tiger down and, bop it on the nose or something. And so for me, what I've tried to remember to do, this one is harder. I have said to myself, okay, if I'm feeling that fight and I want to immediately react and respond aggressively, I recognize it. I say, okay, I'm going to do 10 squats. Or I'm going to like get up and, go up and down my flight of stairs for 3 minutes. I'm going to set a timer, something to get the physical energy out. But if I am feeling that avoidance, if I'm feeling that flight and I just don't want to do anything and I want to check out, say, okay, what is the one next action that I can take? Like, what is the one? And then when I do that, check in again and say, okay, I've done that one. What is one other thing? Because it keeps you moving instead of running away. And so I love that you're talking about these checklists based on your response. And I'd love to hear in the comments too, if you have an idea of maybe what your stress response is. Do you find yourself fighting? Do you find flight, fawn, freeze, all the above? Just a little fun cocktail mixer of a couple of them. Like, I'd love to hear what you think, and maybe we can also talk through some things to add to that checklist for
Yeah.
the people who are on as well.
Yeah. Because it's really important to realize that all of this is individual. So you're going to search the interwebs and you're going to talk to this mental health person here and you're going to read this article here. And what happens is, you notice that I'm saying X, 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 or X, Y, and Z, because none of this really is cookie cutter. And that is the thing, again, I'm here to demystify. That's also another common myth, is that you have to do this cookie cutter thing this exact way, and then X, Y, and Z is going to be your result. And the reality is if it were that way, we would all be the same. And we are not all the same people. We might have similarities, things that connect us, similar situations, similar ways of thinking, but the truth is, at the end of the day, we actually are all very unique. So sometimes you can do a cookie cutter route, but there are new, and it works for you. Sometimes you need nuanced differences. Sometimes you need big differences. So this is why it's important for you to identify where you fall in your response system. And here's the other thing. Sometimes it's multiple. Sometimes you fight. Sometimes you flight, other occasions you fawn, other occasions you freeze. Sometimes you do a combination of all four, depending on what the
Yep.
external stimuli is. You might be in fight mode, but you're fawning. And so because of that, you actually become afraid to ask for clarification from your boss for fear of seeming incompetent, inadequate, whatever those thoughts might be that keep you from saying, hey, let me get a little bit more perspective on this. What do you have a due date? Do you have this? And so we also see those things that happen as well, especially in the workplace, when oftentimes there's a bit of a hierarchy and a power dynamic. So it's also important to understand that as you're creating these checklists, as you're walking through and seeing where you fall on these scales, know that it can be a combination, and also know that what you're identifying and the ways that you need to mitigate that might look different than what your friend Sarah does, or what your husband does, or what your wife does. And so it's really important to identify what works best for you as far as self-regulation techniques, soothing techniques. Counting backwards helps some people. Holding a squeezy ball and relieving that stress, just as Susanna mentioned, to exert that additional energy, she likes to move her body. Body movement does help, but the movement that she wants to do, she's doing squats or running up and down, might not be the movements that you want to do to release that excess energy outside of you to help decompress your nervous system. So that's what that is. That is nervous system regulation that is happening when you're doing that body movement, because it's your nervous system that's gotten activated, and it's moving, it's firing all of these neurons and synapses, and it's moving all of this energy around because it's trying to prepare your body to fight. It's preparing your body for survival. So I don't know if you've ever seen an animal that goes into shock very easily, and you see them kind of shake to decompress once they're coming down from that shock. Or if you've seen somebody in shock from a catastrophic event, you might see them shake to come down. That shaking is your body your nervous system trying to re-regulate and release that extra energy that was being built up for that fight mode, for that survival mode. So we're getting all sciencey today, but just
I know, right?
but
I'm an anatomy nerd. I love this.
but that just, depends on what is happening, what the stimuli is, how frightened you become, maybe how that person, how your boss approached you, or whatever the case might be. But when you are in crisis mode and you're trying to manage a crisis, the last thing that you want to do is react on the emotional impulses that you're feeling in that moment. And you want to take the time, and this is where commitment comes in, because all of this is easier said than done. You will
Yes, it
not do
is.
it perfectly right every single time. This is again where grace and self-compassion comes in. But these are methods that you can slowly start to integrate, and you will start just doing it one time, you will feel a world of a difference. And maybe the second time you try to do it, you fail and you don't implement and you forget. But then the third time you do it and you feel good again. So building a habit is just like losing weight in the gym. You don't go to the gym and pump some iron for 30 minutes and lose 50 pounds. You do it gradually and slowly over time. So, but first identify where you fall, how you generally react, and then create the antidotes for that. Well, I need to count to decompress. Let me slow down. Let me do some journal writing. Write down those thoughts in your journal. Some people like to go out, if you can, take a walk and, those sorts of things. Get out in nature. Do a guided a quick guided meditation. So these are all things that you can use to help lower that stress hormone cortisol as it's building up, get some self-regulation, and then you can effectively think through, what is my next step to manage this crisis appropriately.
Yeah, and I love to, again, because it can be so much, right? Just to see like, where do I start, especially when it's such a unique thing. So I think kind of the steps that you outlined make a lot of sense of identify, even just pick one, like, okay, I know in this situation I tend to fight. Okay, start there and say, okay, well, what does that look like? I tend to react quickly. I My tone changes. I feel my heart and blood pressure rise. Okay, you have those three things. Now, like you said, what is the antidote to each of them?
Yeah.
Okay, well, I tend to respond super quickly and maybe without thinking and maybe harsh. Okay, what can I do instead? And maybe, maybe that's turning off the camera for a second or saying, hey, I have to go run to the restroom. Can I come right back?
Mhm.
And giving yourself a break. Or, if your tone shifts, maybe instead of initially speaking, pause, take a breath, take a big breath, and then see if that shifts something, or maybe you have a mantra that you say before you respond when you notice that. And so it makes it very tangible and very doable. Start it, you don't have to outline how you react in every situation to all four of them and all the things. Start with one, list just a couple of ways that you typically respond, and then specific antidotes for you that might work. And then from there, like you said, the commitment piece, and it's like big C word for me because I struggle with consistency and commitment. I'm really strong at the start, but man, keeping it up is hard. And so for something like this, when you have an antidote that you're going to try, give it a little bit of time before, dismissing it, saying, oh, well, this doesn't work. Now, that doesn't mean, oh, I'm going to do it for 3 years and it's not working. No, no, no. But give yourself like a couple weeks maybe of trying something out and see how that goes. Because, like you said, you're going to have some times where you remember, sometimes you don't, because you're building a habit. So if you give yourself a little time, it's going to help you really understand, okay, this piece is working for me, but this is not, or I've tried this and it's really not doing anything. Let me move on to the next thing to try out. And that can make it more manageable and doable. And then super quick, just a reminder, if you have just joined us, we are doing a little giveaway at 125. And so we want to make sure that if you want to be entered in, just type your name or say hi in the comments and we will enter you into that drawing. So make sure to do that before 125. Anyways, that was just my little, I'm trying to remember to say it out loud. So,
Reminders.
reminder,
We have to
but
share Reminders. But that's really good. And I think you brought up a really good point that I want to address: consistency and commitment. So just because you are not consistent doesn't mean you're not committed. And too often we think, if I'm not consistent, I must not be committed. I see a lot of clients. I have a lot of clients that are committed. They have the desire, the want, the this. Desire doesn't necessarily translate to action. Commitment doesn't always translate to consistency. But as long as you're committed, you will keep doing the thing. And just like Susanna said, over time, you will become consistent. So if you're not consistent with it in the beginning, that's okay. And if it takes you 6 months, a year, that's also okay. The commitment comes in when you don't give up. So that shows commitment. When you give up, that's when you're not committed. As I always say, you never failed unless you quit, because you can have moments where you've learned lessons. You can have moments where you've learned lessons. Maybe things didn't go the way you hypothesized or had desired or wanted to, but as long as you keep going, you didn't fail. Failure means you have stopped. You haven't gotten back up and continued to try. You've accepted that failure, you sat with it, and you turned and went somewhere else, and you just left it there and decided not to pick it back up. So to me, that's what true failure looks like. So when you think about commitment, being committed to these changes that you're making, commitment doesn't initially translate to consistency. And that's just a part of the change process, as a normal part of the change process. It's not going to become this big habit overnight. That's not the way anything happens. Nothing in the natural world really happens overnight. A flower doesn't just bloom overnight. There's a seed, and the soil has to be cultivated. When we look at everything in the natural world, even the universe and the earth, nothing was created in a night. Nothing was created in just one split second, unless you believe that. I'm not going to get into all of that. But when you look at the natural world and the way leaves blossom and bloom, it to our eyes, when we wake up in the morning and it's springtime and we see the blooms in our mind, we're like, wow, that just kind of popped up. But no, it had been growing over time in that soil, doing the things that the plants do, that the leaves do, to develop and to cultivate. So when we look at just the natural world and the rules and principles of the world, and the way things grow around us, nothing happens overnight. Not in the animal kingdom, not in nature and plants and anything. So the same with you. You're no exception. You are no exception. So for you, your growth, your change isn't going to happen overnight. You've been growing this way for however many years, however old you are. So it would most certainly cause you great distress if you thought that after up 10 years of growing in this way, that overnight you're going to all of a sudden just be this new person, have these new amazing habits, and it's going to just happen seamlessly, with no hiccups, with no setbacks. And so don't do that to yourself. Try really hard to abstain from that line of thinking. And this is where that grace and that self-compassion comes in. So as you're growing, as you're shifting, as you're implementing those antidotes, know that commitment doesn't initially equal consistency. You just stay committed to continuing to do the process, whether it's infrequent or inconsistent, you're still committed. And don't let anybody else tell you otherwise. Tell them that Classie of CW Intentional Life and Business Design told you that, and you're going to stick with it. You're going to stick to it because you're working on your self-compassion. You're working on your grace. And remember, having self-compassion and grace, it's not making excuses for your behavior. It's not making excuses for anything. It is simply saying that you're going to give yourself the same level of grace and compassion that you would extend to a friend. So if you had a friend that was going through something and they were just like, oh, I'm feeling like this because I can't make these changes, what would you tell that friend? You wouldn't be, hopefully, most people would not say that you're just not committed. You're this, you're that, you need to da da da. right? You would give them grace. You would speak to them in a compassionate and loving way. So extend that same love back to yourself. First, love yourself, and then you can love others. So extend that grace back to yourself and say, okay, you know what? I am committed because I really do want this. I just didn't consistently follow through this time. How can I do better next time?
There's so many good nuggets in there. First of all, I'm trying to remember. There was a quote. Well, you said it, and there was a quote, and I'm gonna butcher it, and I'm so sorry. But it was something about, follow the flow of nature. Her secret is patience.
Mm,
And when you were talking about, patience and nature, that I think, and it's funny, even though, I'm a wellness coach, I know about these things. Just because we know it here doesn't mean it necessarily connects all the way to our deepest, most selves of, behavior change, anything, losing weight, shifting your mindset. It is a marathon. And I hate to say it, but I don't think there's a graduation where suddenly we get a diploma and we've reached the top of the mountain. We're like, we're good. Cool.
no.
That's it. I don't think that's how that works. And so this patience idea is really important. And like you said, yeah, it might look like, oh, suddenly there's blooms, but there's also the seeds in the soil and the watering and all of this stuff. And we are just as precious and beautiful and need just as much cultivation. And I know you and I have had talks offline as well, just like my own personal thing of like, I love that commitment and consistency. And there is a difference between, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, from your perspective of if you try something and you are committed to something and you make a conscious choice to shift that energy from one direction to another, that's a little bit different than necessarily that failing piece, which is this didn't work. I don't like it. All of that energy, I'm leaving there and it's stagnant. But if you make a conscious redirect,
Yeah.
that's a little bit different. But I do love that. And that made me feel a bit better, even of like, okay, just because I'm not consistent doesn't mean I'm not committed. I am committed, and committed kind of seems like this overall thing. You're not going to, I feel like a lot of times when we start challenges, it's like, I'm committed. Well, the commitment piece doesn't necessarily come right then. The commitment piece comes later, actually, when you say, okay, I have a choice to stop and let this energy stagnate here, or I have the opportunity to get back on and try something new or try again. And that's where commitment comes in. It's like at the beginning, maybe it could be like, I'm ready to be consistent or try to be consistent. And then later on, we check in with ourselves and say, okay, am I committed when I'm not feeling good, when I'm feeling like I've hit a wall? And, that's also where it's really important to, and I'm excited because later on this summer, I think in July, we're going to have a well-being Wednesday that's all about, how to be a social bucket filler and how to, your social wellness. And so when you're in that place where you're questioning the commitment or you're needing to pull in that commitment to get back up, that's also where it's really important to have the support structure around you, whether that's people who are trying to make similar changes and going through similar things. Like that's why I'm, Be Well, Care Well, we do so many social challenges where you're doing it together or you have an accountability buddy, because maybe when you're at that low slump and you're having a hard time getting back on the commitment train, maybe your buddy's like, come on, we said we were going to the Zumba. I'm already in the car. Get your butt here.
Yeah.
Or maybe you're both feeling that and you just need somebody who gets it.
Yeah.
Having that, and or your family members who you've talked to it about, or your friends or a therapist or whoever, like having those support systems in place to also help with that commitment, because none of us are an island. I don't care. And I say this in my training. Y'all know you cannot like people. That's totally fine. But having some sort of support, we are truly social creatures by nature. And so even if you are like, I hate people, I don't like them, don't want to be around them, we still need some sort of support, whether that's just very few and far between, and maybe it's just one person. But knowing that, how do I cultivate whatever that is for me and building that support? And that's another part of why we're talking about mental health this month, making sure people know they're not alone in feeling how they're feeling, or there is help, but there are people you can talk to. And when we go through the commitment piece and we're trying to make behavior change, it's uncomfortable. It's
Mhm.
uncomfortable and it's hard. And in some ways, that's how you know that you're kind of on the right path. If you're feeling a bit uncomfortable, that means you're probably doing something different, which means you're probably working towards different results.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
just all those things. Sorry, what you were saying
No,
just
but
like brought up
I mean,
so many good points.
that's it right there. I mean, because all what this is neuroscience, right? Like behavior change is neuroscience, the mind body connection. I remember growing up, before I became, a therapist, before I went to school, before all of this, and I would be doing things and I would have those similar thoughts. I'd be like, I guess I'm not really that committed to it. I guess you're not really that committed to it. I guess you don't really want it. You hear those things. You don't want it bad enough. You don't really, and it's like, actually I do, but here's neuroscience. Here's the brain body connection. My brain has been wired for 15 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years to process information in this way. My brain is literally wired for me to behave like this. I have to rewire my brain. I don't know about any of you, but I'm not a neurosurgeon. Okay. And a neurosurgeon can't even do this. A neurosurgeon cannot go into your brain and rewire the synapses. Okay. No one can do that. That is a natural process of behavior change. So this is not just on a system level, on a body makeup level. This is much more than you hear CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. You just change your mind and change the way that you behave. It goes beyond, it extends beyond that. That's just one step, one small step
Mhm.
for man, right? Like that's just one piece of the puzzle. The other
Mhm.
piece is that commitment to continuing to shift that behavior, and that's where that rewiring of the brain slowly comes in. That's why they say it can take 90 days for a new behavior to become a habit. And the more
Mhm.
you do get consistent at the action, the more that habit begins to integrate into your operating system as a person. But that is building new synapses, rewiring the brain from how you've been connecting things, perceiving things, processing information, processing stimuli, responding to stimuli. Your brain and your body keep the score. If you haven't read that book, it's a really good book to
So
read.
good.
So that's why change extends beyond just you're not motivated enough. You don't want it bad enough. You don't this. For some people, they can tap into that mindset and go. For some people, it's different. That's why I said none of this is cookie cutter. It looks different. And that's why we have to extend grace. You'll hear all of these, public speakers and such. Okay, I've got a gnat that wants to enjoy my face. So,
He wants
you
to support you.
it wants to support me. And so, you have all of these life coaches and, you know, co- coach strategists or whatever, and they'll say these and we get lost in it. They'll say these very generalized statements around becoming something. You just got to want it. You just got to do it. You just got to this. You don't want it bad enough. You got to want it bad as you want to breathe. You got to this, you got, and what does that do for the people who are like, but I do really want it, but I can't make the change. But I do really want it. I really do want it. I really do desire it, but I don't know how to get there. I don't feel motivated enough. You just got to get motivated. You just need to start. And all of those things are great. Don't get me wrong. All of those things are great. They are adrenaline junkie motivators, are what I like to call them, because they're just fleeting motivators. They
Well,
tap into,
and
okay, go ahead.
yeah. Well, no, it just like that was something that was coming to me. You were talking about when we are in fight or flight, you want to not act on those emotional impulses, right? Especially because there's impulsivity. But a lot of times, and what you're describing is basically acting on an emotional impulse, which don't get me wrong, there is so much science and it is so helpful to emotionally connect with our goals and desires. But, and I fall into this because I am an adrenaline junkie, I'm not gonna lie. I love that little high of like, yeah, let's go. And if I don't have that high though, if I'm not feeling motivated at the time, I'm like, oh, well, I'm not motivated. I don't want to do it. And that creates an issue because emotions, like you said, are fleeting by by their design.
Yep.
And so if I am basing my actions, my behavior, my habits on a fleeting emotional response, my actions are probably also going to be similarly fleeting and inconsistent because
Yep.
there is that point of, yes, you have that emotional connection. You want to feel it. You want to connect with that emotionally. And commitment, though, a part of it is not, it goes beyond that initial emotional motivation. And so when you're talking, I was just like, oh my gosh, absolutely.
Yes.
So if you're not feeling it, that is okay. Like what one of the things that helps me, and again, it's just one piece, but like it helps to just do one small action anyways. I don't want to get up and take a walk outside today. I'm lazy. I can sit inside. I don't want to. Okay, well, can I put my shoes on? I
Mm-hmm.
can do it whether I have that great emotional motivation or not. And that's where again we kind of integrated of I might not feel the want right now, but I know that that's my overall goal.
Yep.
So what is
I
one
know that it's
small
what I
thing?
need to do to get to where I want to go. So
Mhm.
we can't just jump on these. That's why I stopped doing like in my messaging and in my marketing, I don't do the rah jump on board train type of marketing and messaging because I know that while that might get you in the door, it's not going to keep you in the door. It goes beyond that.
Right.
So just like that, initial you're like, yeah, it feels good. And if you don't feel that high, that euphoria around what you're doing, then you're like, I'm not going to do it. Commitment shows up on those days where you don't want to get up at 6 a.m., but you have to get up at 6 a.m. because you're committed to your future goal to get to where you're going to go. And, getting up at 6 a.m. and doing your morning routine and the things that you need to do, that's going to get you further faster than you laying in the bed till 9 a.m., 8 a.m., or whatever the case may be. So when you are, that's where that commitment piece, that's where the connection to that commitment comes in. So the more that you're able to get over that initial high, that initial emotion, that joy, that euphoria that you feel of like, yeah, I just did it. And you're just like, oh, I really don't want to do this today. But then you still take the actions, you still take the steps. That is where the commitment lives. That is where the commitment resides. It's not in the look at me, I'm posting this picture on social media and I feel so good. It's not in this, superficial space of how I can feel good about it because it doesn't always feel good. It's not going to always feel good every single day, but you do it anyway because you're committed to the future you. This is one of the things you remember I shared with you PPF, past,
Mhm.
present, and future. So what happens is when you're talking about neuroscience, because this isn't just like trauma responses or things like that. This is neuroscience. Sometimes for people it is a built-in trauma response, but again, this is still neuroscience. So we can still change our behaviors and our habits when we look at it in that sense. But when we talk about past, present, and future, when you're wanting to project something new into your future, you can't operate on the past. You can't make decisions in the present based on the past. That's where you see a lot of people that are like, I've been trying to do XYZ. I've been trying to make this change. I've been trying to figure out how to handle crisis better. I've been trying to this, and this. But you're making decisions in your present based on your past experience, not based on the future version and where you're trying to go. So you keep projecting your past into your future. And so when you actually start to say, okay, what would future me do? If future me, that anecdote, if future me wants to be like this, then I need to do X in order to be able to start responding like this to crisis. I need to do X in order to start responding like this to when I'm feeling burnout. If I'm tired of getting to that stage where I feel burnt out, where I feel stressed, I feel spread thin, I feel like I'm putting out fires everywhere, I can't think, my sleeping is off, all of the things that come into play when it's burnout. It's not that you must not want it bad enough. It's not that you must not want to not be in burnout, survival, fight, flight, or freeze or fawn mode anymore. It's simply that you need to make present decisions based on the future of where you want to go and not the past of where you've been. So you've got to get out of the habits of the past, the behavioral habits and the habits of the mind of the past, and step into the future. And that's where those antidotes come in. So just take it one step at a time and go through each of the areas. But those antidotes, that's the future you. And if you want to project your future and you want to create your future, you want to take steps towards your future, you have to make present decisions based on the future of where you want to go, those antidotes.
Yeah, absolutely. And, going back to the whole synapse thing, right? It's in those actual commitment times. That's because, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like that's in a lot of ways when we hit that synaptic wall. We hit
Yeah.
basically our old programming when we're like, I don't wanna. That's what we always do. And we are wired to go this way.
Yep.
Like our wiring is going to shift us this way. So
Yep.
when I don't want to go this way, it's because the synapse is going this way. But every time you choose, you know what? Future me, I want to feel this, shift.
Yep.
Well, next time you're going to still want to go this way because again, it's hitting against that synapse. Just like with the children that we work with when they're forming the synapse, for us as adults, we kind of have to undo that synapse and then redo a new one. But
Yep.
every time in those commitment moments, those I don't want to's, those I choose to do something that's a little uncomfortable,
Mm.
that's when we are rewiring. Because unlike electrician, an electrician, they pull back the layers, they maybe undo and redo, and then boop, they're done. We
Yep.
have to do that through our actions and our behaviors and our thought process. Like there is no, like you said, there's no other way for anybody or anything to come in and just boop, 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 and move it over. We have
And the
to
big
do it.
component to that is that emotional intelligence piece. And that's what you were talking about earlier. So if you click the link in one of the previous posts, I don't know if we
I
can,
think it was on Monday,
it was on
May
Monday, if we can get it down
15th.
here in the comments.
Yeah, I'll put it in the comments.
Okay. And that way, go and take that emotional intelligence assessment. You know what emotional intelligence is? It's going to help you identify how your EQ, your emotional quotient. This is a formulated one. So if you're like, is this the such and such emotional intelligence test? No, it's not. It is the CW Intentional Life and Business Design one that is it uses everything that we're talking about today. It leverages all the insights, but it's going to email you your score, your understanding, where you are, and it's going to give you, based on your responses, it will send you an email that's going to tell you what would be really good for you to do. What are some things that, based on what your score is, what your number is, what you've input, what are some tips, some changes, some habits, some things that you can do to help support you in your journey towards emotional intelligence, gaining greater emotional intelligence, because this is how you get to that space of change behavior and shifting in your habits and your habits of the mind, and being able to be more aware of how you react, how you engage in certain emotionally heightened situations. And it's going to help you be able to determine what things you can do differently. So it'll be a really
Absolutely. And I did find that it is in the comments down below. And so I'm actually going to make a shift with our giveaway because one of the things is, we want you all to be able to take your time. We know that not everybody has an hour, right? That they can just kind of dedicate in the middle of their day. Maybe people were on and off. So one of the things that we want to do is we want to give you all some time so that in your schedule with your boundaries and your rules, for you to be able to watch this and add in comments and different things like that. So we're actually going to extend the giveaway and we're going to be sending out some information. So for those of you who are watching the replay, you will have up until 8 a.m. on Monday morning to watch the video, go to the end, and then type in either a comment or your name. And that's how you'll be entered in for the drawing. So first thing, 8 a.m. on Monday morning, because again, we want to respect your time, and maybe the weekend is going to fit into your personal schedules and boundaries and behaviors and all of that. So we want to respect that. And so watch the video, comment your name or say hi, or maybe something that you're taking away from this video in the comments, and that's how we'll enter you into the drawing, which we'll do 8 a.m. on Monday. So you have this whole week to watch it, rewatch it, and comment below for the giveaway. So we really want as many of you all to get all the amazing things out of this that Classie shared with us. Classie, it's always a pleasure. We love having you on every time. I'm so excited. This is the first time we actually did a full hour and we needed it because we do it every time. So, thank you so much. And again, in the comments and on Monday, on Monday's post on the 13th. The 13th is Classie's emotional intelligence little self-assessment, and you're going to get an email with some feedback and maybe some starter points of like, what are those antidotes? And so we'd love to hear all of your different ahas as you go through this. And please stay tuned for the rest of Week of Wellness, which is going to go through Friday. And then we'll do our giveaway drawing for a special something on Monday morning at 8 a.m. So for those of you who have not yet, please make sure to follow Curricula Concepts on Facebook and Instagram. Just that's how you're going to get notified about Wellbeing Wednesdays to come. And please feel free to share this video with your friends, your colleagues, your family, whoever. And we will be back next month. I believe it is June 5th is when we are going to have our next Wellbeing Wednesday. So thank you again, Classie, for joining us. And we are going to let everyone go almost on time. We're just a minute over. But thank you all for being here. And I am wishing you well for the rest of this week. Bye, everyone.